right, so it is 9 o'clock. We are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome. I'm Erin Livingston with HGAC, and we have a great webinar lined up for you this morning on household hazardous waste. Before we get started, I do want to go over some general notes about the event logistics. So the first thing, this meeting is being recorded. Microphones will be muted and cameras will be turned off throughout the presentations. If you are on the phone and unmuted, please go ahead and mute your phone at this time. We will have time for questions at the end of each presentation. Just type your questions in the chat box. You can access that by using the control bar on the bottom of your screen. To do so, click on the speaking bubble icon. You can also raise your hand and we can unmute you if you prefer to answer or to ask your questions verbally. If you're on a handheld device, you can access the chat by clicking on the 3 dots on the lower right-hand side of your screen and choosing chat in the menu. If you are attending this webinar via telephone only and prefer to ask your question verbally, you can press *9 to raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute during the question portions of the workshop. And if you have any issues during any time of the webinar, just type those in the chat box and either Wendy or Andrea will help you out with that. So we have a great lineup of speakers for you this morning. We'll be hearing about one-day collections, permanent facilities, the rules associated with HHW collections, and finally, education and outreach. You can also find the agenda in the chat. It might not be posted just yet, but it will be there shortly if it isn't. So before we get started with our first speaker, though, I do want to take a quick poll to find out what type of collections are offered in your community for household hazardous waste. Can we pull up that poll? Thank you. You are able to select more than one option for this question. So if everyone could make their selections now, we'll find out the collective experience of the audience. All right, y'all are starting to answer. Awesome. Give it just a little bit. We're going to move quickly because we do have that full agenda. So got 55% of you have voted. Oh, lots of nothing available. That's hard. Oh, but we do have quite a few permanent facilities, so that's great. Okay, we are going to close the voting at this point. We hit 75%, so good. Yeah, so the top one is there is nothing available. Followed next by permanent HHW facility, so that's kind of surprising to me, but very awesome. So, and only 2 of you only have BOPA collections. So interesting. Okay. Well, thank you very much for participating in that poll for me. And so at this time, I would like to welcome our first speaker for the morning, Catherine Krantz. She's a program planner with the Texoma. Oh, did I not share the results or did y'all share? Okay. What do I need to do? Did I close that or y'all closing that? Can somebody close the poll or do I have to share it first?
Erin, on my end, the poll is closed. So if you're seeing something, maybe you could close it out.
I'm sorry if I was supposed to share that. I'm sorry that y'all did not see that. Yes, but what I was saying, Catherine Krantz, a program planner with the Texoma Council of Governments, which is which is HJC's counterpart up on the Texas-Oklahoma border. She'll processes and strategies for operating a successful one-day collection event for household hazardous waste. You can type in your questions at any time during her presentation, and I'll be monitoring the chat and we'll pull those questions for the Q&A portion of her presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Catherine.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Let me share my screen. Okay. All right. Well, goodness, we practiced this, but whenever I go to share the screen, it's covered up by the Zoom controls. Okay.
You're sharing your screen. We can see your calculator and your desktop.
Oh. Well, why isn't it? Sorry. Okay. There we go. All these challenges. Slideshow. There we go. Are we ready now?
Perfect. Thanks.
Great. Wonderful. So my name's Catherine. I run the Municipal Solid Waste Department up here at TCOG, Texoma Council of Governments. That is 3 counties up north near the Oklahoma border, north of Dallas, Cook, Fannin, and Grayson counties. Just a little background, we have no collection facilities in our region at all. The closest facility is over an hour away, and they are facilities that are specific to cities, so our residents are not allowed to use them. So the only things that we do in our region are collection events. We have one city, the city of Sherman, that does their own collection events about once a year, and the COG does all the rest. So traditionally, we have done one really big collection, simultaneous, one event in each county on one day. And that was a really huge event. It was almost 850 people spread out over the 3 counties. We had a real free-for-all as far as people showing up, first come, first serve. We had people waiting for 2 hours. We had to turn people away. And so in 2020, we decided to really dramatically change our program, scale back, and come up with smaller events. So that's the background of me. And I have not been in this industry very long. So for those of you that are new to this, take heart. I was able to jump in and get a pretty good handle on it pretty quickly by attending a lot of training from the COGS, from NAMA, from other Solid Waste Planners Association. So here we go. What is HHW? So HHW, household hazardous waste, is defined by the Environmental Protection Agency as leftover household products that are toxic, corrosive, that can catch fire, react, or explode. Products such as paints, cleaners, oils, batteries, and pesticides can contain hazardous ingredients that require special care when storing and disposing. Improper disposal of HHW can include pouring it down the drain, onto the ground, into storm sewers, or putting it out with your regular trash. Options for proper disposal include HHW collection facilities and HHW collection events. First thing you need to do if you're going to do a HHW collection event is set a budget. For us, you need to determine where your money is going to come from. If it's going to be through grants, fees, partnerships. We have spent as much as $150,000 for one day event and as little as $15,000. We have a member city that has spent less than $5,000 on a one-day collection event by contracting with a city that has a facility. Non-hazardous collection events are less expensive. You need to set a timeline, minimum 45 days in advance, because the TCEQ requires a 45-day public notice permit filing. I would suggest 3 to 6 months of planning and promotion, depending on how organized you are and how quickly you can promote. First thing after that is to pick a vendor, a full service commercial HHW collection vendor, of which there are several in Texas. You can partner with a facility. For example, the city of Fort Worth has a collection facility and a trailer that they contract out for collection events. The city of Sherman has used them. There may be a city in your region that would be willing to do that for you at reduced rates, or do it yourself. If you are thinking about doing it yourself, there are some things you need to know. State law does require that anyone collecting, sorting, or transporting HHW needs to be permitted, certified, or trained. HHW collection may also require a chemist on site to identify products for proper storage and disposal, as well as train employees. Also, disposal landfills can be really a long way away from your location, could be in hours trips for transport. And the only way for us to justify doing it ourselves is if there was a city in our region that was planning on having a HHW facility at some point in the future. That's how we could have justified the expense of training and supplies. So for us, that was never an option. So we hired vendors to do our collection events. Next thing you need to do is set what you will accept. So what kind of HHW will you accept, and also will you accept non-HHW? So for the kind of HHW, you need to think about what items are the biggest problems in your area, what you get the most calls about. Are there year-round collection options for those items? What items have no other options? Also consider that some items are more expensive than others to dispose of, and that's something your vendor can tell you about. Things like thermometers or propane tanks, and you need to decide if you're going to limit them or restrict them. If you are thinking about non-HHW, HHW requires certification, but some things that are non-hazardous, you can collect them yourselves if you have enough volunteers, such as BOPA, which is battery, oil, paint, antifreeze, car batteries, electronics, tires. Also, some items that could be recycled will be landfilled by a collection vendor just for efficiency at an event. Things like latex paint, which is recyclable, rechargeable batteries, car batteries, etc. Car batteries are actually valuable. You can sell them. They're about $10 each. So I know we used the collection of car batteries as a fundraiser. We just separated them out. You can separate these items out from the HHW, and it may even lower your disposal cost. But the more stations you have, the more space you will need, and the more volunteers you will need, and the slower it will go. So you have to maximize efficiency. So like I said, in 2019, our event was really huge. We did another event in 2020 that was dramatically scaled down. It was only HHW. For our next event, we are adding more things. So once we got a handle on it, now we're bringing more stuff back into it. So our next one, we're going to do HHW, latex paint, electronics, tires. Okay, once you know what you're going to accept, you need to pick a location. So this is our location at TCOG. This is our office building. So we just use our own parking lot because we have a little bit more control over it. This is something you can get from Google Earth. You can get these maps and diagrams. So this is our location. Consider traffic patterns. Think about where your cars will enter and exit, where they will line up, how many lanes, how many stations, where will the employees and volunteers park so they don't block the lanes, how many volunteers we need, who will be checking in, directing traffic. So really quick, my little diagram here shows them entering from Gallagher Street. These little red and orange dots are my barricades. So also this picture is from Google Earth. So it has cars in the parking lot, but for the event, we told the building to send out a notice to all the tenants that they cannot park in the parking lot that Saturday. So there were no cars when we got there. Off to the left is where the employees will park. The green dots are my volunteers. The blue dots are signage. And as you can see, we just direct them here. And they go all the way down to station number 1, station number 2, station number 3, and then they exit out here. So the main things you need to know is you need room to line up the cars as much as possible off the roadway. You can see from these pictures that in the past, when we had hundreds of people lining up for hours at a time, it really was a safety hazard because it blocked the roadway. And we actually had one of our counties, the police came and tried to shut us down. So be careful about having people lined up on the road. Large parking lots are good. You will need to get people off the roadways, and you will need the space to snake them around in a slow, orderly fashion. Ask the vendors what they will need, what kind of space they will need. Ask them if they're going to be using 18-wheelers or bobtails. You can see in this picture up here, the little truck is a bobtail and the large truck is an 18-wheeler. And you can see kind of the space that they need to take up here on the right. You'll see it stacked up, ready to load into the truck. So you would ask them, do they need a concrete pad versus gravel? How do they maneuver the pallets of materials for loading with forklifts or pallet jacks? So that's important because a pallet jack is mainly for a warehouse, so it really needs a smooth environment. A forklift has wheels, and so they can load their trucks even on gravel and grass and loose stuff. So that's important. So we have locations that have gravel, and we also have locations that are smooth. So that's important. Ask yourself, how many stations will you have? HHW, will you also have electronics, tires, paint? How much space do they need for sorting? You can kind of see what we've got going on here. Ask the vendor how much space they need for their stations. Up here on the left, you see our electronics. Electronics are TVs, they're treadmills, they're really large stuff. The HHW, they need some sorting tables and stacking. So an idea there. Okay, permits and permissions. Find out what your city requires for permits. If you need a permit to do HHW collection or even a permit to line up the cars on the roadway. So start with your city. Also know that TCEQ requires a 45-day notice. It's a public safety notice that informs the public that there will be an HHW event at that location, must be filled out at least 45 days in advance. You can change your vendor within that window, but you can't change your location. Also, you need to make sure that the property owner understands you will be doing HHW collection. You may need to prove liability insurance. At the very least, you need to file written permission from the owner to use their location with your 45-day permit. It can be as simple as a letter or as complex as a MOU agreement. So we've had any of them as just a letter saying TCOG has permission to use our facility for this, and as much as a 2-page contract agreement that specifies exactly what we can do. So it really depends on your location. Okay, here's the big part. Appointments versus first come, first serve. So like I said, our event was really huge, bit of a madhouse, and we decided to go to appointments only. I'm a big proponent of by appointment only, and it really saved us in so many ways. But there are some pros and cons, and you have to decide which makes sense for you. So for us, the pros of requiring advance appointments is the event was better organized, the participants were better educated, we could have better control over the numbers, the number of people that were going to be there, the amount of HHW, and more importantly, we could project our expenses. And for us, that was really important because when we didn't know who was going to come or how many people or what they were going to bring, we really were just on the fly the whole time. And we had to rely on our vendor to tell us, okay, you're going to have to cut people off now. We can't take any more. And that required us to turn a lot of people away. One of our locations, I think maybe over 100 people we had to turn away. So I got phone calls for 2 weeks after it with people very upset. So for us, a priority was customer service. So we decided that by making appointments, we could really do a better job. The cons of requiring an appointment is you have to build an online form, and it has to be easy to understand, and it has to be a link that's easy to share in social media. We used bit.ly links, and that doesn't make sense to people, or also we use those QR codes, and that seemed to confuse some of our older residents. So this shareable link makes it easy to remember. Also, you have to build it and you have to get people to use it. So it does require quite a bit more promotion than a standalone event. And that was, we went from having over 250 people to only having 104 people. So there's some concerns with that. As you can see our form here, it's very, very in depth, and that was on purpose. We kind of wanted people to do the work. So we have lots of information. We tell them to print out their appointment. We tell them to arrive on time, but no more than 10 minutes early. That was important because we want people lining up and waiting. We talk about transportation. So we also say very specifically, you will not be allowed to get out of your car. We mentioned that multiple places. That's one thing that allowed us to keep doing our events during COVID, because they weren't allowed to get out of their car anyway. And they're not supposed to be getting out of their car even without COVID, but people would. So that actually helped us. So we also list what we accept, what we don't accept, and the things that we didn't accept, we took the opportunity to tell people where they could go year round for those items. So we use it as education. But the bottom line is it was a really in-depth process. Because of that, we didn't get as many appointments, but the people that did come were really happy. So we set up our appointment time. We allowed people to select in 15-minute increments, 8 to 8:15, 8:15 to 8:30, 8:30, 8:45, etc. And we set up 20 to 25 appointments in each of those 15-minute slots. Now that's something you're going to have to figure out with your vendor, how many appointments they can take within a time period. We determined that they could unload the car in about 3 minutes. It really isn't that long to open a trunk, pick up the stuff, take it over. And they had enough people that they could sort it. So based on that, we were able to do 25 appointments in each 15-minute slot, and they were able to give us a maximum number of appointments that they could serve. And that was key because we couldn't do that projection. We don't understand the costs well enough to project how many people they can handle. They told us, and we set the appointments based on that. So partnerships with your vendors are really important. Okay, so once you get your appointments made or your decision to do it first come, first served, in the weeks and the months before, you need to heavily promote your event. Social media ads, newspaper ads. You can also get help from the cities. They can put inserts in their water bills, or they can put notices on city websites. You can put up posters around town. I also did interviews on radio and TV. The more promotion, the better, because no matter what you do, there's always going to be people that say they didn't hear anything about it. Then you're going to need to assist with appointments. That's something that if you require appointments online, be prepared to do a lot of work. For me, it was worth it because I could do a lot of work. Setting the appointment was better than doing a lot of work for 2 weeks with people screaming at me. So for me, it was worth it, but you have to decide. So help people set their appointments, because there's going to be people without internet. There's going to be people that don't want to do internet. There's going to be people that just don't want to bother. So they would call me, I would set their appointment, and then I would print out a confirmation and mail it to them. 90% of the people were able to do it on their own, but the rest did take a lot of time. Okay, so recruiting volunteers. Beg, bribe your employees, coworkers, friends, and family. Ask your member cities to send staff. Ask your local Keep Texas Beautiful chapter or other school, community, church groups for volunteers. And some counties can get assistance from the jail with trustees. That during COVID might not be possible. But the good thing about COVID is they're not allowed to get out of their car. And when we did our event, the only volunteers we needed were just directing traffic. So they didn't have to have much exposure at all. Worked out great. Okay, the day of the event. You need to set up. So set up your barricades, your cones, your signs on the road. And you do all that early in the day or the day before, because cars will arrive early, especially if it's a first come, first serve. Some of them will arrive hours early. And you will need to have the space blocked off so they don't block the entrance for the vendors. The vendors will arrive early to set up, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, depends on how much work they have to do. I recommend providing tables for volunteers to check in, get supplies, coffee, donuts, chairs for breaks. The biggest danger is going to be the cars, distracted driving. There's a lot of things for them to take in. They're not going to be paying attention. So you really need to have large, easy to read signs at the entrance, exits, and all stations. And really the larger, the better. Have safety vests or bright colors for your volunteers. So here's a picture of my volunteers. So we use this really bright green t-shirt, and we make everyone wear the t-shirt, and then we also give them safety vests. So that's important. You can see over here the cars lining up too. Okay, statistics and reporting. This was important for us. You can decide if it's important for you. We had a volunteer at the entrance with a clipboard to check people in.
Catherine, I think maybe your slide stopped moving forward. We did not see a picture.
Oh, really? How about now?
No.
Uh-oh.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, it did. It said it. Okay, well, joy. So these are my volunteers. You can see their bright colored clothes. And statistics and reporting. So have a volunteer at the entrance with a clipboard to check people in, either by checking them off an appointment list that you print out, or by asking for their city and zip code if they're on a first come, first serve. We do not require a water bill to prove residency, as we are a regional organization and we serve cities and counties, but some city events do require proof of residency before allowing people in. This will require a little bit more time to check their papers, and some of the things you can do about that if you have a long line and it's going slow is send multiple volunteers down the line if it gets backed up. For us, we need to know where the people are coming from so we can keep records for our members. What we collect is how many cars, which is how many participants. We consider it participants / households. So how many cars from each city, so that that city can know the demand. And if there's more HHW collection demand, we can use that statistic to encourage the city to host their own events or do more. We also track the value of our services to our member cities in our annual report. So that's why it's important. Once we determine the cost per participant, we can tally up the value of the service. So cost per participant is when you take the total cost of the event divided by the total number of participants. And $150 is an example. $150 times 115 residents from the city of Denison equals $17,250 value that the COG provided to the city of Denison. I don't have enough time to go into the cost per participant, but that's something I'm really working on, and I've got about 4 or 5 different versions that we really get that number a lot lower. So don't be shocked by that. We have options that are $50 participant all the way up to $200 participant. So, but that's something to track as well. Okay, TCEQ reporting. I'm not going to go in too much about that because I think we have some more stuff about that at the end, but anyone who has a facility or does HHW collection will need to file an annual report of items collected and proof that they were properly disposed of. You should get a copy of the HHW manifest from your HHW vendor before they leave that day. They will also send you a final manifest when they have properly disposed of those items. Most of your TCEQ reporting information will be on the manifest from your vendor. Things to know: check your TCEQ reporting requirements before your event to understand what you need to track, because some things on your TCEQ reporting will be listed by item, others by pound, and it won't be easy to figure it out later how many items, because it says batteries, and some of them are car batteries and some of them are hearing aid batteries, so they're very different ones. So, and also if you're collecting tires and electronics, know that some items are in pounds and some items are in number of items. On the top, you see our pallet of car batteries that earned us about $3,000. So that was 2,500 pounds of car batteries that we were able to divert and use for fundraising for our program. Underneath there is electronics and then a big old ugly pile of tires. Okay, HHW, finally, we're at the very end. HHW liability. This is important for you to know. At the end of the event, you will need to sign your manifest turning over responsibility of the HHW collected to the HHW vendor and send them on their way. You will generally get a copy of the manifest that day, as well as a follow-up by email and a final manifest when the HHW is properly disposed of at the facility. The facility is usually someplace really far away, South Texas, Louisiana, someplace far away. It's not just any landfill, it's a really specific place that they go. These are important documents to keep because you are responsible as the event organizer. You are responsible for all of that HHW and any damages it may do from the time you allow people to give it to you until the time it makes it to its proper disposal, including damage and spills along the way, which is why you need to hire a reputable, certified, and insured HHW collection firm to man your events, because at the end of the day, it is hazardous materials and there is some inherent danger and liability involved, and it's important to be aware of that. Okay, so here we are. If you have any questions for me, here's my contact information down here. Also, there's some great resources on the TCEQ website that talk about the laws and the rules and training requirements. There's also a site about planning your collection event. Your TCEQ contact is Hector Lujan. He does HHW over at TCEQ, and that's his phone number and email. And I am now done with my presentation, a whole 5 minutes early. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Y'all have been trying a lot of great things up in your region, and I'm sure you gave people some new ideas to try out at their events in the future. So we are gonna go ahead and take some questions at this time. So I do already have a couple that were entered into the chat during your presentation. So we'll start with those. So anybody else can go ahead and type theirs in. And then we'll also be monitoring in case anybody does the little raise your hand thing. So the first question is, how did the appointment situation affect the elderly showing up?
Well, so a lot of the people that I had to personally sign them up were probably in that category, people that weren't as comfortable doing online. Now, we did intentionally do a lot more outreach. So when we opened up the appointments, I sent them out to our waiting list, because we had a waiting list. I sent them out to our member cities. I did try to reach out to elderly people. We used some mailing lists from our agency on aging, and yes, so absolutely, that's a concern. So we did some extra outreach, because let's be honest, the easiest way to promote these days is online, but that doesn't reach everybody. So you have to really think about that. Newspaper as well.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Second question that I had received was, how do you find vendors?
Well, There are several around, and usually they find you. I know that I've met vendors at conferences and training events, and as an entity that's funded by taxpayer funds, I'm not allowed to promote any one particular commercial entity, but at the same time, there's a lot of great ones. I've worked with many of them. I've met a lot of them at events, and I talk to the cities. Our cities that have disposal facilities can tell you who they use. I mean, there are vendors that just do collection. So you collect it, store it, and they come pick it up. And then there are vendors that are full service, which is what we needed. We needed somebody to actually come to our event and set up. So I wouldn't say there's a lot of them, but we are required as a COG to get 3 to 4 bids, and we usually have no problem finding 3 to 4 companies for bids.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm clicking through to see, I don't know how to tell if somebody raised their hand. I don't see any hands raised. So that might be it for the questions. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Catherine.
Wonderful. I will stop
right.
sharing then. And if anyone needs my information, we can get it to you later. So there.
Yes, we will be posting all of the presentations. So you will be able to get everybody's contact information and stuff like that afterwards. So, okay. Well, next up, we are going to be hearing from Cheryl Burton-Fentress, the program manager for Harris County's Household Hazardous Waste Facility. She'll be sharing with us how they operate their permanent facility and just a bit on the changes they've had to make because of COVID. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Cheryl.
Okay, just 1 second. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, can you see it? Can everybody see the screen? Okay, good.
It was delayed.
All
yes.
right. Okay, just a second. Okay, I am Cheryl Burton-Fentress. I manage the Harris County Household and Hazardous Waste Collection Facility. I do come from the disposal industry, worked with MSC Environmental for several years, and then in 2005 came over to the county for their permanent facility. And first of all, thank you, Catherine, for your presentation, because you gave my presentation a lot of background on events. And just to let you know, I am a firm believer in events. I believe that any successful HHW program actually needs to start out with events. I was actually at the very first Harris County Household and Hazardous Waste Collection event, even though I didn't live in Houston. I worked for the parent company of the vendor, which was MSC at that time, and I was asked by their vice president to come and ship their waste. And I did move to Houston a year later to go and manage the MSC office here in Houston. And I can tell you that doing the Harris County events when I was with the disposal vendor could be very, very challenging, because they only got bigger than the very first event that I went to, which was about, if I remember correctly, about 600-700 vehicles. Out of the 4 events that we would conduct every year when we were doing events, 2 of those events would be between 1,100 and 1,500 vehicles, and one event was actually over 2,000 vehicles. Now, these pictures on the bottom are actually from that 2,000 car event. And the one on the right, I know you can't see it very well, but that was about 1/3 of how long that the line actually was. So why do you need to start with events? Because that is the way that you can really get a feel for the needs of your residents, and you really need to listen to them and what they want. Ask them questions at the events like, would you like to be able to dispose of these top items on a more frequent basis? And ask them, do you want to know the positive impact that properly disposing of your household hazardous waste has on the environment? The best thing you can do for your residents is educate them. So if your annual events are really getting too large, then it's time to think about a permanent facility. Now, permanent facilities are not for everyone. They're for mostly in those extremely populated areas where events become so large that you basically are defeating the purpose of holding an event. Large events can actually make residents feel like it's not worth their time coming to it. And here's why. We are an impatient society. We don't like to sit in a fast food line for more than 5 minutes, much less 45 minutes to an hour to drop off our HHW on a Saturday. They also want to dispose of it now. Your residents want to dispose of it quickly sometimes, and not in several months or a year, or when the next event just happens to come along. And that is actually what was happening to Harris County's events. The residents actually would start coming on a Saturday, and they would be calling our office on a Monday to ask for a voucher to the city of Houston or the Montgomery County facility, which is the two facilities we had voucher programs with. So Harris County decided to move over to a permanent facility to better serve their residents. And a few years later is when I moved over to the county. Now, events can also be very costly when it comes to the price per pound or the price per vehicle, just like what Catherine was showing in her presentation. Events are actually conducted when the weather is tolerable. That means not in the extreme cold, and that means not in the extreme heat. So that allows you very few Saturdays to actually do events. Now, in 2019, there were actually 4 times more events than what there were permanent facilities in the state of Texas. So with that many events going on, sometimes it's going to be very hard to find a vendor that has a date open on the day that you want to hold your event. And another bit of trivia is that those permanent facilities actually collected 5 times more waste than the events did in 2019, which means that the permanent facilities actually diverted a lot more hazardous items from the landfills and waterways than what the smaller events did. Your residents are also going to be happier because they can choose the day and the time that they want to come and drop off their waste, and they don't have to wait in line. You also may have residents who can come to your facility because they weren't available on the days that you had the events, and giving them that greater option of days actually makes it easier on them, and they'll start participating in your program. So where do you start? Well, if you're ready to take the step towards going from events to the next level of permanent facility, know that there's going to be a lot of things that you have to consider before making your final decision. I cannot express how important it is to find somebody that's already done this. The people that have already gone through the startup of a permanent facility know the ins and outs, they know all the ropes, and they have already cried a million tears through the process, and they are there to prevent you from having to do the same thing. Trust me, we are not mean people. We want to see you succeed and not have to experience the mistakes that we went through. We're going to be realistic with you, and we're going to be honest with you about the process. So search us out and use us. And equally important is make sure that your government or the entity that you're building this facility for has the buy-in, because it can get very dicey along the way, and there's going to be times you want to pull your hair out and give up. So make sure that they not only have the buy-in, but that they understand that you need to sustain this program for many years. Don't hide anything from them. Make sure that everybody involved knows that it costs money to run these facilities, that we don't make money at these, that proper disposal actually costs lots of money. And also, what you want to do is make sure that you're flexible and don't have your mindset on just one way. I can tell you in 2008, when we were starting the startup of our facility, I had plans drawn out for a brand new facility. Then a slight recession came along, and we had to make do with what we had. So we had to renovate instead of create a facility. And I can tell you that it has been just fine. It's gotten a little cramped along the way. We've added some Connex boxes and all to accommodate storage, but it has been 100% fine. And I am very proud of this facility and its operations. And when it comes to locations, know that a household hazardous waste facility is a lot more than just land and buildings. You have to know the dollar amount that you're going to have to work with, and it has to be reasonable and realistic. Getting started is expensive, but there's always ways to cut the cost by applying for grant money and other creative means. And the location of it needs to be easily accessible to all of your residents. It needs to be on well-traveled roads in a location that people are familiar with. And it also has to have an excellent ingress and egress to it. If you look up to the picture on the right, that is actually our facility before we started renovation, and our entrance is right there on the left, and they just go straight through the facility and exit onto a main road. And be reasonable. Only accept BOPA, what Catherine was talking about, batteries, oil, latex paint, and antifreeze. Only accept those in the beginning, and you can add waste streams as you feel more comfortable. And think expansion. Remember, your program is going to grow. Make sure that you have room to store more, build more, and queue more cars through there. And that is actually one of the problems that we had when we started growing, was because you can see that right there, we're right next to the feeder road of one of the main highways in Harris County. So also, this is one thing that Catherine touched on. Make sure that you have financial assurance, or you're going to have to purchase pollution insurance, which can be very costly for your facility. Be ready to sustain and be ready to grow your program. And if you've got all that behind you, then you're about 50% of the way already. So there's a lot of main points that you need to know when starting up a facility. Once you decide on what you want to build for your budget, make a plan and stick to it. Now, what you want to do is you want to be ready for challenges along the way, ask questions, and you want to get answers up front. Make a timeline using the advice of your mentor and your vendors, and allow time for items to be ordered, built, received, etc. Set your opening date far out in the distant future. It's going to catch up on you a lot quicker than what you think it is. It can actually take so much longer than what you think. So don't be rushed at the end or having to postpone event dates or anything. And then I cannot express how important organization is also. Buy plenty of big, huge 3-ring binders and print and keep everything that you read, see, and learn along the way. Make sections for each piece of equipment, building, manual, warranties, emails, everything that you come across. Even keep pictures of the process, and you're going to really use a lot of it along the way. And no matter if you're renovating a previous building or building from scratch, keep all of the building plans, because trust me, at some point along the way, you're going to need those later too. Take that from experience. This can also be very overwhelming, so use your mentor. There's a lot of documents that you're going to need to file with the TCEQ. Your mentor can guide you through them. You're going to have to fill out so much more paperwork to the TCEQ than what you do just a regular event. And before you make a budget, find out exactly what equipment you will absolutely need to have, what items can make your life easier, and what you should avoid because they're just not worth the money. Call other permanent facility managers and ask them about what they can't live without, what they absolutely have to have, and then what they wish that they wouldn't have bought in the first place and spent the money. Communicate frequently with your builders who are building or renovating your facility. Ask questions and don't be afraid to question them. Even if they say something's okay and you feel that it might not be, continue to ask them until you get an answer that makes you comfortable. I also know that one from experience. And decide on how many days you need to be open to accommodate your residents and decide what hours. Think about what your residents' needs are, not what you need. Because you don't want to work on a Saturday doesn't mean that 50% of your residents don't need to come in on a Saturday. So make sure that you accommodate to them. If you don't come from a hazardous waste background, I'm going to tell you, start soft and accept BOPA only. Those items are actually about 65% of what you get at a full HHW facility or at a HHW event anyway. The more training that you get, the more items you're going to feel comfortable accepting, and it's going to be a lot better on you and a lot less stress. Now, you're also going to have you and all of your staff take a 40-hour HAZWOPER training before you even handle the waste. And then you have to have an 8-hour refresher every year after that. There's a lot of places that you can get trained. Just call me, I can hook you up with them. Get your vendor to come and train you well ahead of time on packing waste. And then it's also a really great idea to have them come and work with you the first couple of weeks that you're open to the public. I kind of look at it like this. It's just like the movie A Field of Dreams. If you build it, they're going to come. We didn't even advertise when we opened up our event, and we had 56 people just by word of mouth on the first day that we opened. And now pre-COVID, we were getting about 160 people per day. So when you're first opening, don't send out a huge email blast or anything, or you're going to be very, very overwhelmed. So start softly and make your way up. And if I had to sum up what a household hazardous waste permanent collection facility actually is, I would say that it's a permanent location where you accept certain HHW items from your residents on the days and times that are convenient for your residents. Basically, it is just like conducting several continual events, but on set days and times in an environment where you have more control over your operations. It allows you to have more time to pack the waste, store it, and not have to ship every day. And it's really going to save you a lot of money. You can make it weekly, you can make it monthly, you can make it only in odd or even months. Just make sure that it is consistent. Your residents are going to like consistency, so make sure it's always on the same day at the same time. An example is pre-COVID, we were only open on Wednesdays and the second and fourth Saturdays, and we have always been closed the weeks of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the week after Christmas. So they're used to that, and that's what they remember. You can actually start off accepting only BOPA and antifreeze, and then you can add other things to it. And Andy's going to talk a little bit more about that in the presentation, but you can add things like tires, recycling, electronics, all kinds of things like that, the more comfortable that you get. I like to call it one-stop shopping, and the residents actually like that too. If they've got just one place they can drop off everything, it makes them a lot happier. And then the more that you learn and the more comfortable you are with packing, the more ways that you can actually find creative packing methods, and you can also save money on your disposal costs that way. Make sure that you also have a user-friendly, informative website. We have a Google Calendar on ours that actually tells them the days and times that we're going to be open. It also gives them information about our smaller Hazmobile collection events. But right now, our calendar just states by appointment only, and they have to click and go to a scheduling calendar because we knew that when we came back after COVID that we were just going to be slammed. So we actually have a scheduling calendar on our website right now. You can use your website as a really good teaching site. Let them know why it's important to properly dispose of HHW. Have a frequently asked questions page. We get a lot of telephone calls from businesses, so we actually have a business waste and what you need to do to properly dispose of that page. We have other ways that you can help the environment. You can actually put on your website how batteries, if left in a junk drawer, can catch houses on fire. How not to put your fats, oils, and grease, which people call fog, down your sink to keep our pipes from clogging up. And most of all, remember that you have to maintain records to complete your annual reports, just like on an event, to the TCEQ, and that you still need to adhere to the Texas Administration Code Chapter 335, Subchapter N. You're going to have to almost memorize that. And then the last thing is enjoy your job. I'm not going to lie. There's going to be days you want to pull your hair out, but there's a lot far more great days that you're going to have. Events can get out of control and just get really crazy. And I will tell you that I am so glad that we have a permanent collection facility, because here again, it does provide a controlled environment, and it has actually allowed us the ability to follow COVID protocol and to stay safe. So basically, that's pretty much how a facility runs. And then last year came COVID-19. Now, our facility had been operating for exactly 10 years and 1 week when it closed to the public on March 17th. We resumed operations again on September 15th. And while working at home, we knew that we were going to have to do a lot of research and a lot of work. So I think that we read every COVID article and watched every webinar relating to safety that we could get our hands on for free. We did a whole lot of research. We made a lot of calls to other facilities to see what was happening with them. Were they open? Were they closed? We learned what problems that they were encountering when they reopened. And from what we were learning from them, we realized that we were really going to need to make a lot of changes to our operations before we opened back up, not only to handle the backlog of people not coming for 6 months, but also to stay safe. So what we did, we wrote a new mandatory 8-hour training program that incorporated COVID protocol. And we also had to write a reopening plan that had to go up through the chain so that we could even open up. It provided in detail the changes that we were making to abide by COVID guidelines and to ensure that we were doing everything possible to keep our staff and the public safe. And then some of those things are actually listed here on the slide. The two biggest changes I think that we made were being open 2 additional days during the week and making it by appointment only. Like I said earlier, we were getting between 140, 160 people on Wednesdays pre-COVID, and then we reduced it down to the first couple of weeks, about 36 people. Now we're taking 60 people per day by appointment only, each day for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We limited the number of people that can work at the facility each day, and we actually changed their seating stations during the morning health and safety meetings and on their breaks. As you can see by the photos, that they are actually 6 feet apart, and they have everything on their desk waiting for them. I know exactly where those tables are supposed to be, because in that middle picture, you can see that I put a piece of blue tape down on the bottom so I can see if they're moving their tables or not. We need to make sure that they stay 6 feet apart. We don't want them to be back at the PPE area, getting PPE at the same time. So if they need additional PPE when they run out, they give one of the staff a piece of paper that says what they need, and then she goes and gets it and has it on their desk for them the next time that they go back to their desk. We even offload and pack differently now just to maintain the 6 feet social distancing as much as what we possibly can. The residents who use our facility also has had to endure a few changes. The number of people that attend per day, here again, was getting to an unmanageable point. So we knew we were going to be bombarded. And so those 2 additional days have actually helped us work that out. And we also actually, hold on, it just flipped. Okay, sorry about that. And we also continue to limit the number of paint that we can accept. And for COVID purposes, we're not giving back their motor, oil, and gas containers to the residents. That has made a couple of them upset, but for the majority of the people, they understand and they go out and buy one of those 5-gallon snap lids and they bring it in that. But the most frequent question that we get from residents is, why do I have to make an appointment? And other than limit the number of persons per day to maintain order, is that we have to have them agree that they will follow COVID protocol. They actually have to check boxes off when they're making their appointment, stating that they have read the new procedures and the new protocol and that they will abide by it. Unfortunately, we still are having problems with residents who come to the facility and we cannot offload them because they have not followed protocol. They also admit that when they check the boxes, they didn't bother to read the information. So we have to have them go off site, pack their items in the specified locations, or they have to go get a face covering, and then they can come back to the facility on that same day. And just like what Catherine was talking about, we also do have to make appointments for residents who do not have an email address or access to a computer. And what we do, we just read everything to them and we click off those boxes for them. The challenges that we've had, well, we were lucky that last February, it was the end of our fiscal year and we had just made a large purchase of PPE. We did, however, have a hard time in the beginning purchasing face coverings and sanitizing products, but we no longer have that problem. COVID protocol and information continues to change weekly, it seems like, and so there's a lot of us having to monitor and adjust accordingly to make sure that we stay safe. In a way, the world had turned upside down and we had to take some really tough calls when we first worked from home and when we first reopened. We learned very quickly that when people are forced to work from home and they're not allowed to go to the movies, restaurants, and other places, that the first thing that they do is clean out their garages and their cabinets. And they all want their HHW items collected out of their home right then. We had to do a lot of explaining to a lot of residents that we were not essential personnel, which didn't go well with a couple of people. But remember from a couple of slides back, you know, that I discussed, we don't like to wait. Well, we found that out very quickly. And the first about 4 to 5 weeks, we were booked 1 to 2 weeks out, and it's now slowed down a bit. We're now back to about just a little bit above what we would be doing per week. In 3 days is what we were doing in 1 day before. And the good thing is once they come here and they go to the facility, they are realizing that they don't have to sit in a long line, and they're really getting adjusted to having to schedule appointments, and more liking it now than not liking it. One of the bad things was during the 6 months that we were off, I lost 2 of the part-time Wednesday workers to full-time jobs. So I did have to do some replacement and training about that. For the overall discussion, I would say that the impact on the facility has been a lot more positive than it has negative. The workflow is much more consistent now. The staff is a lot less stressed. They're not looking out, seeing 50 cars in line and feeling that they've got to rush. They actually feel that they're a lot more relaxed. They're enjoying their jobs more. Again, it's really causing a better morale, and there's fewer mistakes that are actually being made. Shorter lines also mean happier residents, and the customers are very happy that we're open the additional days and kind of want to see that stay. And the pounds of HHW actually got greater per vehicle, but we're not seeing that many more residents coming through. We also noticed that after COVID, we had a lot more first-time residents. The negative is the number of residents is a little bit less than what I thought that we would get. It has tremendously increased our cost for disposal because of us trying to social distance and changing our packing procedures. There also has been an increase for the temporary staff due to the additional days that we're working. And we still have a couple of people that don't want to follow the rules, but overall, positivity does prevail. We've been extremely successful and have received a lot more positive feedback than what I think we ever have before. And the good thing is mankind is creative, resilient, and new and innovative methods have actually allowed us to become more resourceful. And soon we'll be back to where we were, you know, before. And what we do is not easy. It's hard work, and it seems to change frequently, which can cause a lot more stress. And we had been so busy before that we were almost at a breaking point. And that 6-month break, when I sit back and look at it, actually gave us a time to regroup. And I personally think that we've come back stronger. I'm very proud of the people that I work with. And they are what makes this successful, even though what we've all been through the last 12 months. And that's one thing that I have really made a point of doing since we've come back, is asking them, how are they? Because it's been very stressful the last 12 months, and especially last week. And I want to make sure that not only are we doing our job and we're serving our residents, but that they know it's all going to be okay in the end. And you can reach me right here. And I am one of those people that you can contact for being a mentor if you are thinking about doing this.
All right. Thank you so much, Cheryl. As always, you are a wealth of information for our region and about
Thank you.
to those that don't have as much experience with this as you do. So I have not had any questions come up. I guess you were just so thorough, but if anybody has any questions, quickly type those in, or you can raise your hand and I can get you unmuted and you can ask the question. So I am watching. Give it just a minute. Okay, well, there is more time at the end that you could ask Cheryl questions if you come up with something. Oh, there we have one question. Is the service offered free of charge?
Yes, it is. We do this as part of our TPDES permit, which is our stormwater permit for unincorporated Harris County, and we are free of charge. We do not take businesses. We're not allowed to take business waste or any nonprofit waste, church waste, school waste, things like that. I think Andy might be able to talk about this when he talks about the city of Austin. I believe that they do that, but we don't, so we don't charge at all anybody.
Okay, and one other question. What changes that you've made because of COVID are you going to actually keep afterwards?
I am hoping to keep the scheduling because it just makes the facility run so much smoother. And I also am hoping that we can keep one extra day open because I think that's going to help us a lot. And I actually like the fact that they sit there now and they're so quiet on their break sometimes that it's scary. So I think it gives them time to sit, and it lets me get in there with them sometimes and talk and do, some teachable moments and things. So those are the things that I'd really like to keep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. We are going to move on to our next speaker. So next up is Andy Dawson, the Assistant Division Manager overseeing the City of Austin's Recycle and Reuse Drop-Off Center. The City of Austin has a great household hazardous waste and recycling facility, as you might expect. And today he's going to share with us how the City of Austin goes beyond your standard HHW collection facility to better serve their residents. So your turn, Andy.
All right, great. Thanks, Erin. I appreciate the introduction. Let me get my presentation pulled up here real quick. So, like Erin had mentioned, I'm an assistant division manager with the City of Austin. The department is Austin Resource Recovery, formerly Solid Waste Services. I guess I should probably start off with a little bit of background and history about how we actually got here. Is anyone having trouble seeing the screen?
No, we can see it.
Great. So we had been doing intermittent, or first was annual, then biannual, then quarterly mobile events for household hazardous waste since about 1985, 86. And towards the end of the century, there was a big push to start to collect a whole lot more recyclables. So the facility that I'm sitting at right now, the Recycle and Reuse Drop-Off Center, was originally half a MRF, a material recovery facility, where material that was collected curbside starting in 2000, would be brought here and processed, and anyway, it would be brought here and processed. But we did not realize how popular the service would be. So it kind of outgrew our little MRF that we had here. We had a few expansion efforts, but they quickly got overwhelmed as well. So we kind of outsourced our MRF to a couple of folks in the area, to a couple of private folks, and then yeah, it just left a vacant building and a bunch of vacant equipment. So at some point we had to figure out what to do next with it. As of course Catherine had gone through and mentioned, we were accepting household hazardous waste, or HHW, the whole time on the other half of the facility, right next to the MRF that was in operation. So that's been in continuous operation since about 2000. When we first opened, we were only doing Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and then we added the first Saturday of every month, and then we added every Saturday, probably about 2012, and then here in a little bit we anyway, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me get to that here real quick. Currently, well, I guess FY19 is kind of the last time we can get really decent numbers. In 2019, we had collected 2 million pounds of HHW, 35,000 customers specifically for household hazardous waste. And we do this, we have this product called Austin Reblend, where the staff here will collect all the good latex paint. We have a pretty simplistic way of separating colors. We've got an off-white, a green, sometimes a blue, beige, and a darker color. So we try to separate those colors out as best we can and package that up and offer it for free to the consumer. And anyone who has any experience with HHW programs knows how much of a savings reuse programs can be. We do have this reuse shed that we have on site that takes all the good, usable household hazardous waste and offers it for free to the public, so that we can reduce our costs, and then people can also get, cleaning supplies or whatever for free. And then the reblend up on the screen. Well, that's my supervisor, Richard Avila, from a few years ago, sorting batteries. And batteries are one of our, because they're so heavy, they're one of our larger waste streams by weight. Batteries are kind of not my favorite thing to do. So just to be able to run the numbers, we sort about 2 million individual batteries a year from all their different chemistries, alkaline, lithium, lithium ion, nickel metal hydride, nickel cadmium, lead acid, and silver oxide. Anyway, the little photo ones. Anyway, so that's anyone who, again, has done a BOPA collection event or operates a facility will be familiar with the ins and outs of that. But going back to the vacant facility we had, there was a real push, or let me back up and set the stage a little bit more. We had the department serves single family houses and apartment complexes up to 4 units. So we do single family houses, duplexes, tris, and quads. But anyone who lives in an apartment complex greater than 4 really didn't have any way to get rid of their recycling unless it was provided by the apartment complex. This is, of course, it says stock photo all over it, but this is the only resource for many years that apartment dwellers downtown had. Y'all, at least those that are in the Austin area, will remember a place called Ecology Action that was right downtown. They took all kinds of stuff, and they were a great resource for a lot of folks prior to the adoption of our universal recycling ordinance that over time phased in the requirements for facilities to offer recycling to their residents and apartment complexes to offer recycling. So now it's in full effect. So anyone, the goal was to offer easy recycling for any resident within the city of Austin. Go back to 2015, however, you can see I-35 kind of in the background. And this place was downtown, and it got real, they were leasing that land, and it got real expensive to maintain that lease. So the property owner wanted to sell eventually, and that prior to the adoption of the universal recycling ordinance meant that apartment dwellers would have no place to get rid of their stuff. So to try to beat that eviction, if you will, of ecology action, we wanted to set up our own recycling center. And we had this big vacant location. So we thought, why not offer all of those services that ecology action did on our own site. So we, had to get a lot of equipment and a lot of folks hired. And eventually in October 2015, we rebranded this place called the Recycle and Reuse Drop-Off Center. That is essentially half an HHW and half a recycling center. We are trying to make it as easy as we can for folks to recycle a lot of stuff. Some of these are fairly easy to integrate, some not so much. Tires, we were already collecting curbside, and we were already accepting at that vacant facility. So we, as part of our twice annual bulk trash collection, we have residents separate their stuff into metal items like furniture, non-metal items like appliances, and then tires. So 3 piles in front of each house, and different crews will come by and pick up their different stuff. So those crews that go curbside will come by and pick up their tires, and then come to the RRDOC and drop off their tires. Initially, you can see at the top of what's called the Resource Recovery Center, but having a place called the RRC and the HHW that kind of described one facility was really confusing. And as a municipality, we love our acronyms. So we settled on the RRDOC. To try to expand our reach, we had a lot of electronics. That was fairly easy. We just kind of palletize this stuff and shrink wrap it and ship it. Mixed recyclables, and I'll go through a bunch of these other ones. Brush and yard trimmings, and anyway, all the stuff you can see on the front. The operation started, let's start with tires. We specify in our contracts that tires have to be recycled rather than incinerated or used as a tire-derived fuel, or TDF. Mostly cement kilns will use TDF for fuel, and it's not the worst solution, but it's not, of course, not the best, especially if there's about a tire per year for every citizen in the state of Texas. I'm sorry, in the United States. So again, in FY19, we did about 298 tons just collected curbside, and a small percentage of that was folks that had come to this location. These tires are mostly recycled into those curb stops, like you can see, or playground surfaces, or more and more frequently, they're being used to rubberize asphalt to give roadways a lot more flexibility so they don't crack as often. I think you can add up to 8%, I think, tires in asphalt, and it really improves elasticity. Electronics, we did a little over 1 million pounds in 2019, and I'm still waiting for this number of this percentage of CRTs to drop, but it has not so far. They're real heavy individually, and there's a lot of folks that, have some, just stashed in a closet somewhere. So they don't know what to do with it. They've been told that it's hazardous, but there's not really any local solution to getting rid of it. So anyway, we ship a lot of TVs. It's crazy. But anyway, this was one of the easier items to implement because all we kind of do is separate it into one of 6 or 7 categories, palletize it, shrink wrap it, and put it on a truck. So we do that about 20,000 pounds per shipment, and so that's probably about a shipment a week. 1 million divided by 20,000. So anyway, it's fairly popular, and there's not a whole lot of options in the area to recycle the breadth of electronic items that we accept. So in addition to all that stuff, we got a few balers and compactors to recycle residential single stream or mixed recycles, the stuff that's generated, just in everyone's household: paper, glass, plastic, cans, all that stuff. We do separate our the majority of our mixed recyclables from our large corrugated cardboard, just because it's a lot easier and it saves us a lot of time and effort and space to bale up cardboard specifically, and then have a compactor feed into a closed box for the rest of the single stream. Styrofoam, this was actually one of the trickier ones to implement because the equipment's not cheap. We did get a couple of grants that would help us pay for the equipment. We now currently have 2 styrofoam machines running, just because one was not enough. It is, however, become one of the more popular items that we take. That right there is how it comes out of the machine. What we have is a densification unit, where it shreds the material up, and then an auger will force it through a heating tube, and it'll come out in a tube on the end. And we have these molds that make it real easy to put it in boxes and then ship off. A cubic yard box will weigh about 1,500 pounds of styrofoam, or I guess at this point it's polystyrene. It's not really expanded polystyrene like styrofoam technically is called. I think we did about 60,000 pounds last year, give or take a few thousand. So while it doesn't, by weight, it's not one of our larger items, it is definitely the most labor intensive, because people have to make sure it's clean, make sure there's no food or contamination, and that it's the right type of styrofoam. I'm sorry, it's the right type of foam going into which machine, because you can't just take the different types of foam and put them all together, because they all have different melting points, and it's really seen as contamination once it gets to the vendor. But these are used in the polystyrene that you can see is ground up, pelletized, and then used in picture frames, stuff listed there, outdoor furniture, crown molding, stuff, smaller trinkets and stuff like that. So the actual, in its infancy, the recycling side started off with wanting to recycle or recover refrigerant out of ACs and refrigerators. So we had a bunch of folks that are EPA certified to recover Freon, and there is a market for it. So we'll put the good Freon with similar types, and folks will buy it. It's not enough to offset the entire cost of the whole operation, but it does help with, you know, justifying its existence. So we do a lot of, we recycle scrap metal, copper, stainless steel, aluminum. Probably our biggest single item within scrap metal is appliances like refrigerators, just because, again, there's not a lot of good places for it to go in town. And the places that do accept refrigerators typically charge for the Freon or the refrigerant recovery. So you'll just drop it off here and then they can take off. And the last, the thing that's probably the biggest pain is that and it's mostly out of its own popularity. We do take brush and yard trimmings here from City of Austin residents. It's our single largest item. I mentioned we did, I may have mentioned we did in this whole place, 12 million pounds of all of our waste streams combined from about 100,000 customers. Now compare that with the previous figures of 2 million pounds of HHW from 35,000 customers. And there's a little bit of overlap, but all said and done, we had about 100,000 customers dropping off 12 million pounds. Half of that 12 million pounds by itself was brush, just because it's really popular, especially after storms, as you might imagine. But the groups, I got about close to 25 folks on staff here, and really split half and half. And the HHW folks are just, even though they do like a smaller percentage of the overall total, they're about as busy as the other side that is doing the remainder 10 million pounds, because, you know, the recycling guys can use equipment to move their stuff around, whereas the HHW guys are, you know, they have to examine each and every single piece of item that comes in. So anyway, that 2,500 tons is taken offsite to a wastewater treatment plant and mixed with stuff that is collected, brush and yard trimmings that are collected curbside, and mixed with wastewater sludge to create dillo dirt. It's a soil amendment. It's not really a fertilizer per se, since it is mixed with wastewater sludge that may have industrial sources, water from industrial sources in it. There is a concern about heavy metals in this dillo dirt. So it's great for yards and lawns, just not really like gardens, especially root vegetables within those gardens. So anyway, we get a small percentage of that ground up brush prior to it being mixed with the sludge, so that we just have straight mulch available for pickup. And all these services are free. I think it's important to have a lot of community support. And here in Austin, I mean, we do. We had closed for some time, closed completely when the coronavirus locally cases really started to ramp up, and people got really angry. There were folks that were calling city council, even state representatives were called to try to have us open up, and it was I don't know, it was frustrating. Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, Cheryl seemed to have a whole lot of luck with adjusting her schedule a lot, but and expanding her hours. But we were open 6 days a week, and people were coming, you know, people were just, whenever you show up, we didn't make appointments or anything. And people got used to that. And now we still have, I mean, we've been doing this for about a year, and now people are still showing up at the front entrance wanting to know why we're not open. We're doing it by appointment, HHW pickup by appointment now. But I think that's a whole nother topic that I could spend half an hour on discussing. But Cheryl had mentioned something about businesses before I get too far away from HHW, where since I guess it was probably about 2010, when the TCQ kind of changed its interpretation of a lot of the rules. Since then, we don't take small quantity generators, and now I guess what's called very small quantity generators. It's just we don't do businesses at all. No churches, no nonprofits, nothing. Just only residential. Like Cheryl said, we get a lot of threats about those folks throwing it into the trash. But I mean, I can't. It's not our rules. It's the state. Talk to your folks I'd say in Austin, but you know, that's us. But anyway, we do have a lot of support in the community. And Catherine mentioned something about needing to pay for it all, which can be fairly expensive. It costs disposal, maintenance, fuel, utilities, wages, and all the stuff associated with the full burden of an employee. Costs about $3 million to run this place every year. That is paid for by an 87-cent charge to each of our 200,000 residential customers. No, there's more than that actually. That 200,000 are what we serve directly, but the city charges its clean community fee to nearly all the 1 million plus residents in the area. So that helps us pay for a lot of this stuff. And that means that it's open to anyone within the city that wants to come. We do charge for out-of-county residents for more expensive items. Like HHW, folks from outside the county have to pay for HHW disposal. We have an interlocal agreement with Travis County that helps share the cost. And that's, I think, pretty critical to expanding your reach, is having relationships with other governmental entities. We need to expand as much as we can, or we have known that we need to expand to the northwest. We're currently located in the southeast of town. So we have been talking with municipalities and counties in the area to try to figure out what to do. There seems to be support until it comes to who's going to pay for it, of course. But a lot of folks are coming in and really want the service. So that's kind of it. That's kind of all I got. There's the address for y'all locally, and there's my contact information. I don't know if I caught any of the questions that were being posted.
That's okay. I've got it handled, so you don't have to catch them.
Great.
So, but first up, thank you, Andy. I did take a tour of your facility a few years back, and it was great. And it was great to be reminded of all the things y'all are doing up there. So we'll see if we get how many questions we get through. So the first one: how do you recycle your fluorescent bulbs?
Through our vendor, through our hazardous waste vendor. We had toyed with the idea of getting one of them bulb crushers that you put it in the tube and it smashes it and does all that. But there is no, right about that time, a lot of news started coming out about how like there was a school that had mercury getting into the HVAC system. So we just decided it wasn't worth the liability and started shipping it through our vendor. Or kept.
Okay, so y'all just put it in a box.
Yes.
Kind of shipping it. Okay. Next one, do you accept AA, AAA, C, and D batteries?
Any kind of battery you got, we'll take.
Okay. Are there any security requirements for accepting electronics, especially those that could contain data?
Yeah. We don't advertise how we do it to the customer because we don't want people to start looking around, but essentially we have it locked up on site. We've got cameras facing it. The data containing equipment specifically, everything else is just kind of on pallets on the floor. So we'll handle the computers, servers, cell phones, tablets, all that stuff a little bit differently. We'll lock it up on site until it's ready to be shipped. We'll put it in the front of the truck because they're typically the heavier items as well. Helps stabilize the trailer a little bit. And then we put a seal on the trailer doors. And we haven't had an issue yet, luckily.
Great. Question, is your CRT tonnage increasing, decreasing, or staying about the same?
It's staying about the same. I mean, it's decreased by about a percentage point over the last couple of years, but they're still pretty popular.
Okay. What happens to the glass collected? I don't think this is specific to CRTs. I think it was just a separate question.
So quickly, glass is
Well, I
handled-
guess it says, are you finding a domestic market interested in purchasing it, or is it exported? Sorry.
So if it's the glass collected in the single stream, that is handled by our vendor, and they got a pretty good. Balcones Resources is our current single stream vendor, and they just received some honors from some glass recycling folks about their great efforts. So a lot of their stuff goes to installation, like fiberglass installation. As far as CRT glass, we require that all of our vendors, potential vendors, have the e-steward standard for recycling electronics, and that requires that no electronics can go from developed countries to developing countries. So glass is, if I'm not mistaken, glass is exported, but it's to Spain, which is considered a developed country. And they mix it with tile, so it locks everything up in tile, is how I currently understand it.
And we're out of time, but we have one final question, so we'll go. It says, the website says y'all are closed as of December 24th, but we'll schedule the HHW pickups. Any idea when you will open back up for appointments or otherwise at the site?
Yes, the HHW pickups have been very popular, so we are scheduled out until March 8th. We plan to reopen on March 9th by appointment only, and that's for all the services. We're just doing only HHW at home pickup right now.
All right. Well, very awesome. Thank you so much for your presentation this morning. And we're going to move on to the next presenter. Well, no, actually, we have a poll that we're going to do first. So we're going to do a quick poll. If y'all could get that up and running for me. So this time it's about the amount of participation you get at either your permanent facility or your one-day collection events. Are you getting the right amount of participation, too much, or would you like more? So we'll give everybody just a little bit to get their votes in. All right, the votes are coming in. And I can't really tell what's going to be in the lead yet. It's a tie. We'll see. Okay, well, it's pretty close between what we expected, and we want more people to participate. Only one person so far says that they have too much. So I guess we will close that poll at this point. And yep, that's where it stayed. It said most people, well, 54% said that it was what they expected. And 38% said they want more people to participate. So I think maybe the last presentation, the 5th presentation, will help you get more participation for those that are looking for that. So, so now we are going to move on to our 4th speaker. We have Jack Ranney, an account manager with Clean Earth. And for those the cities and counties, those of you that are from the cities and counties in the HJC region, HJC does have a contract with Clean Earth. They are our vendor. So if you are looking to host an event, you can use that contract to have Clean Earth work with you on that. And you can contact me and get information to contact him if you don't get it today. But today he's going to be talking about the regulations that you need to follow if you're going to be operating a permanent facility or a one-day collection event, and a bit about HHW collection from the vendor's perspective. So turn it over to you, Jack.
Thank you, Erin. Great presentation so far. And I think that hopefully mine's going to tie in to some of the information that Catherine and Cheryl and Andy had provided in their presentations. I'm going to probably go into more depth on the regulations. Let me see if I can get my screen up. Or can y'all see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, household hazardous waste regulations, and from a vendor's perspective, I'm going to get right into it. Why are there regulations for household hazardous waste collection programs? Well, one, the household hazardous waste, you can go into many stores, Home Depots, hardware stores. You can buy chemical products that are harmful to the environment, can be dangerous, that fit the definition of hazardous waste. And we use them every day in our lives, but there really are no regulations that can be enforced, or it's practical to have that can monitor and or for residents to follow, because of the millions of people that buy products. So the regulations that are in place are focused on collection programs and the hazardous waste management and disposal companies that service the household hazardous waste collection programs. I think it's important to note that was also referenced in the previous presentations that education and training, public awareness is extremely important to get residents to understand why the collection of household hazardous waste is as difficult as it is, for lack of a better way to put it. It's complex, and it's important for them to understand not to put hazardous waste items in their trash, and to bring it to different collection programs that they may have in their region. And I think it's good also to have an understanding of what's involved, what the collection programs and what hazardous waste management and disposal companies, the regulations that we're impacted by and that we have to follow, because it may be household hazardous waste, but it's still they have hazardous constituents and hazardous properties. As I've just basically previously just gone over, we want to prevent environmental contamination. We want to prevent property damage caused by improper disposal. And we also are concerned, we want to prevent injuries to people. So there's a lot of regulations on training and environmental health and safety of employees and the people that operate household hazardous waste collection programs and permanent facilities. Waste is dangerous and is potentially harmful. In the household hazardous waste, if I can move, household hazardous waste typically has the following characteristics. It's ignitable, it can be reactive, it can be corrosive, it can be toxic. And so these are common characteristics of the products that we buy, and that when we no longer need them and we want to dispose of them, then it becomes a household hazardous waste. And I'll get into the differentiations of recre hazardous waste and household hazardous waste, in a little bit. And this is just going back to another, to kind of show you some pictures of why we have regulations, why it's important. Public awareness information is important. We want to prevent illegal dumping, and giving people the proper information about proper disposal options can help prevent that. And what happens is if you do improperly dispose of household hazardous waste, it can result in trash truck fires that can really be very costly to a community. And these are just a couple of photos of what happens when if somebody puts a household hazardous chemical into their trash. And what we see the real culprit is typically oxidizers and reactives, things that can react with other liquids or something that's already in the municipal solid waste, and it can combust and cause an emergency response situation. It's HHW is a material that could put human health or the environment at risk. And it constitutes the most direct and frequent way the public is exposed to hazardous waste. Government is often the driving force for environmental goal setting and policy that fosters natural resource conservation, environmental protection, and public safety. Institutions as well. And it's not, we have regulations for a purpose, and that's to protect the environment and preserve and protect people. And so the regulations, the regulation can be they're voluminous and they're complex. And, the 4 sets of regulations that that govern, if you will, collection programs and hazardous waste management companies that service collection programs and process the household hazardous waste that's collected are your Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, Department of Transportation, your OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Act, and then here in the state of Texas, this TCEQ has specific regulations for to address the management of household hazardous waste by collection programs and hazardous waste management and disposal companies. And we're going to get into these in a little bit more depth. Vendors and program, these are responsibilities for vendors and program managers. We are required to identify and evaluate all the waste streams. We have to properly collect it. We have to store it safely in accordance with regulations, and it needs to be disposed of in accordance with regulations, and through permitted facilities. Documentation is essential. Follows the cradle to grave. We want to know, okay, and I'll show you here in a moment a waste profile. To understand when that waste is generated, that it's documented. There's a specific unique identifier number that goes with that waste stream at a facility. You need to also know and have a plan for emergency and spill response, both at the collection event, at the collection program facility, such as Harris County's or City of Austin's. And also then OSHA comes into play to provide the requirements for training employees that manage hazardous waste. I refer to the cradle to grave. That's an old phrase that's essential or incorporated into these regulations. Once the waste is generated, we've identified it. That waste stream, at a collection program or hazardous waste management facility, has a unique identifier. It can be tracked from the moment that it's generated and collected and picked up. It's characterized and then sent to treatment at a TSDF or transfer storage and disposal facility or end waste hazardous waste processing facility. The waste can be tracked, like I said, from the moment that it's generated through its end of life, through the end in the disposal process. And that's important to preserving and maintaining environmental protection and environmental health and safety for our employees. And these are documentation. There's a whole lot of documentation in the management of hazardous waste, from employee training, going to proper labeling, and I've already kind of talked about unique waste profile numbers for each waste stream. Facilities having EPA registering with the EPA, and so that facility it's recorded, it's permitted facility, and it gets inspected to make sure that it's in compliance. And manifest record keeping is essential, and that's part of the documentation process from where it starts in transporting the waste from a collection program to the TSDF or end disposal facility. Documentation is very detailed, extensive, necessary, and records need to be maintained for several years so that in the event something happens later down the road, it can be tracked so we know, the life of that waste stream and what happened. Now I'm going to kind of get more into, focusing on what we do here in Texas and the TCEQ regulations. And Catherine and already kind of highlighted some of this. Collection programs, whether you're a permanent facility or if you're doing a one-day event, are required to submit a notification to the TCEQ that says, hey, okay, we're going to have a collection event in 45 days or more, and we have to submit that notification. That notification has to be submitted to the TCEQ in order for you to be in compliance with having that event. Permanent facilities have to file a facility registration notice, and it's a registration so that they know that that permanent facility exists, and that registration needs to be updated if things should change. And usually the core data form is what is also part of that registration, or the form that helps you file that registration with TCEQ. And then, permanent collection facilities, are allowed to store waste for a certain period of time. And I think it's up to 180 days. But if you should need more time than that, you have to file a storage extension request. But typically, the programs that we deal with, the permanent facilities, we don't see waste being on site that long. They don't have the storage capacity. So, typically waste is usually picked up on a monthly basis from permanent facilities. And obviously the one-day events, the waste is picked up that day from the residents and transported to the disposal facility. And another form that's important is the annual report form that goes to the TCEQ. It's required to be submitted and filed with them by April 1 of each year. Each collection program, like the TCOG and Harris County and the city of Austin, are required to file an annual report with the TCEQ. And I'll show you that report form here in just a moment. But that's a requirement to be in compliance with the state rules. Here's a simple overview of the regulations that apply to HHW program operations. I've kind of really covered this. For one-day events, it's the 45-day notification. Generator status, typically on one-day collection events, your vendor, your hazardous waste contractor will be your generator. And we're required to complete prior to that event. We know what's typically generated in the household hazardous waste waste stream arena, if you want to call it that. We're required to have waste profiles for each waste stream that can be collected at a household hazardous waste event, and that can be numerous. And then the waste manifest, those have to be completed and have to be accurate and required before the waste can be transported from that collection event to the facility. And I'll get more into the Department of Transportation regulations here in a moment. And then the shipping labels, obviously, we'll see, I'm going to get into that a little bit more later. You have to have proper shipping labels on each container. The fines for violation of any of the hazardous waste transportation regulations can be very significant. So there's a lot of detail that goes into completing these manifests and shipping labels appropriately, and also in the permitting of the hazardous waste transporter. And then the permanent HHW facilities, they still file that notification that says we're going to open up this, and in that document, it states you identify that, hey, this is a permanent facility. And it's that lets the TCEQ know that you're about to open. You're going to be opening soon. And of course, you've obviously had to go through the facility registration process. And then we have the same waste stream profiles, manifest, and shipping label requirements as the one-day events. Now, this is a copy of a waste profile. And if we have, every waste stream that we know a program is going to collect, if it's going to be mercury solutions, if it's going to be fluorescent mercury bulbs, if it's going to be a flammable liquid like gasoline, flammable liquids, or oil-based paint, latex paint, reactives, things that can spontaneously combust, and cigarette lighters, pool chemicals. We have to have a waste profile, a completed waste profile with all this information detailed in it, identified for every waste stream that we're going to collect from a collection program. And we have to have these for the waste that are collected, even if we're taking generator status at a one-day collection event program. As you can see, it's a lot of data. And this is part of the cradle to grave. This is what helps us to identify the waste streams and the characteristics of those waste streams so that we know how to process that waste. And then you get, and as I've referenced, the 45-day collection, the 45-day notification, excuse me. As obviously this has to go out no less than 45 days before your event to be compliant. And in that document, it states the operator's name, and typically the operator can be is the governmental entity that's sponsoring the event. It could be a company, but typically it's the governmental entity or the entity that's sponsoring the event. And it gives the contact information of that person. It goes into details on the date, the hours of the collection. And here it asks for more detail. Okay, is this a one-day event? Is this from a permanent collection center? Is this a curbside program, or what's obviously commonly called a point of generation collection service? Okay, and it asks questions. Okay, in the event of inclement weather and your event gets stalled, do you have alternative dates identified to conduct this event? It wants to know the street address of the collection site, and also a permission letter that comes from the property owner. They want to verify that the property owner has been notified and gives permission for that event to be held on their property. And then we have to also go in and identify the types of waste that are going to be accepted at that collection program and or collection event. And typically what we do is we complete these for our one-day collection event program customers. Typically what we see is the permanent facilities, we assist them if needed to help them get this form completed as well. Now also goes, and I've referenced, it goes with the 45-day notification. This is required. If you don't have that property permission letter attached to the 45-day notification, you will not have a complete and compliant 45-day notification that can be approved and or acknowledged, by TCEQ. TCEQ basically just acknowledges that you're in compliance with the requirement. They really don't provide approval. And then what we also do and what's required is to develop an operations plan that's for either a permanent facility and or it's for a one-day event. And this is the TCEQ rules are very specific, and these operations plans are developed in accordance with those regulations. And I'll give you the title of those regulations in a minute. And I'm not going to go in. This is a very lengthy document, quite honestly. So all I wanted to do here is just show you, here's what's in the document. And it goes into very detailed information on the materials that are collected. Okay, the event staffing, who's going to be there, what's their training background, experience factor, and et cetera. How's the waste going to be managed and handled? How are you going to deal with unauthorized waste or waste that comes in that's unknowns, and or waste that's not to be accepted? And or what if somebody comes in with something that's not supposed to be accepted, but it poses a danger if you don't accept it? Things of that nature. So it's a very detailed document that we have to do for every event that we do and every program. And at the bottom, you'll see as an attachment is a health and safety plan. This is another separate document that is as all-inclusive and as voluminous as the operations plan. And in many cases, the environmental health and safety plan does duplicate a lot of that information, but goes into much more detail, offering site plan diagrams of how the collection event's going to the traffic flow down to, more detailed site specifics on where hazardous drainages are that need to be covered and segregated. We want to know where there's electricity is, the water. We need to have a first aid station. We need to have, where the restrooms are. Where is the location in the event of a spill or event that requires evacuation, temporary evacuation of the site? Where do you take the residents and the staff go that's not going to deal with the emergency situation? Where do they accumulate? It has, in the health and safety plan, it identifies local medical resources, hospitals, clinics, emergency response services that can be called on, should such a situation that needs that type of response occur. It's very detailed planning. And the bottom line and the benefit of planning is if something does go wrong, your vendor knows how to manage that situation. And we've thought of 99% of the contingencies and the things that need to be considered in an emergency response situation. And Department of Transportation regulations. This is very important. I'm kind of oversimplified here. I'll show you a permit here in a minute. Basically, when this is essential in the waste classification as well. The DOT has a specific waste classification chart for how drums and waste containers are to be labeled. It identifies the nature of that substance, that waste substance. And these placards need to be on that drum, and you need to have a proper label on that drum that identifies the waste that's in it and what type of waste it is. And that label really has all the information that's part of the cradle to grave, the date that it's been being shipped, and who's the transporter and who's shipping it. And going on to the manifest, this is obviously a blanket RCRA manifest. Very essential. These documents are very essential, and and they need to be accurate. And your program, the Hazardous Waste Management Company program manager for one-day events typically completes these. We like to get these pre-printed and completed because we think we've identified the waste streams that, we pretty well know what the waste streams are that are going to come in to household hazardous waste programs. So we try to have these completed ahead of time, but sometimes we have unknowns. We have things that can surprise us. So if we need to manifest something, we can do it, but we're still required to have a waste profile for that waste stream item in order to ship it. And so, but this is essential. And your hazardous waste, and I'm going to go on to the permit here now in a minute, and I'll get down to that in just a moment. RCRA and DOT regulations apply to household hazardous programs and the household hazardous waste management and disposal company operations. Now, and I'm going to make a differentiation between RCRA and HHW here in a moment, but I'm not going to go into these. But these are the RCRA regulations that govern hazardous waste management, and as you can see, there's a lot. You want to make sure that your vendor, your contractor that you're using, it has a detailed and thorough understanding of these regulations. As you can see, there's a whole lot here. And this goes back to the training requirements that, this is not something you can go take a class on. It's an accumulated body of knowledge, but you do need somebody who's professional, that understands these regulations thoroughly, and knows how your program is going to be governed by these regulations. And it was touched on a little bit by, liabilities and insurance in the previous ones. Make sure that your contract vendor has insurance that can cover your program. Because once that, and you may have your own insurance on, if you have a permanent facility, you're going to have your own type of insurance or self-funding insurance to cover situations. But once your waste is picked up and leaves the site, your hazardous waste, you want to make sure that your hazardous waste management, the company that you've chosen and contracted with, has sufficient insurance as well to cover once that waste has left the site. And in the middle is a DOT permit that shows, okay, this company is a hazardous waste. They're permitted to transport hazardous waste. And what you don't see here also is the requirements of the driver. The drivers are required to have significant hazardous waste management training, and they have to evidence that training and that their compliance with that, keeping that training current on their commercial driver's license. It has to hazmat endorsement on their driver's license. The fines for improperly, if you're not in compliance with the DOT regulations and a truck gets pulled over and inspected, the fines can be significant. It can be $1,500 fine just to the driver, and in some cases up to $10,000 or $12,000 for the company that the driver works for. So as you can see, regulations are designed so that we can safely and effectively manage and transport waste. And it's a serious business. And, household hazardous waste may be looked upon as, well, golly, I bought that at Home Depot, so I don't get the deal. I don't understand why it's so regulated, but it's not the residents not regulated, but the people that are collecting the waste, the programs and the hazardous waste management companies are the ones that have to make sure that the regulations are followed and are compliant, for the various reasons we've discussed. And then you want to make sure that the facility you're using has all of the permits that they're supposed to have, and that they are in compliance. Getting back, is household hazardous waste RCRA waste? No. In Texas and in most states, HHW is RCRA exempt waste. But as we've kind of highlighted, TCQ rules here in the state govern the HHW collection programs per the Texas Administrative Code Title 30, Part 1, Chapter 335, Subchapter N. And that the operations plan that I highlighted previously in the health and safety plan, those are formulated in accordance with these regulations that are in the Texas Administrative Code. And here's another one that's important to touch on, and that's the universal waste rule. Part 273 of the EPA regulations addresses universal waste. Universal waste regulations were developed to simplify the hazardous waste management standards for specific categories of waste: batteries, pesticides, mercury thermostats, paint related waste, mercury fluorescent bulbs. And it's designed to, basically to make it easier and encourage proper management of these waste streams. If we had to treat every one of those wastes as a RCRA waste, then the documentation gets even, and plus this is waste that's generated by household. But there again, your household has your hazardous waste management vendor and your program manager, if you have a permanent facility, they're going to be treating this as if it were, we're not going to slack off on how we manage in this waste. We're going to be treating this waste in accordance with the regulations. But it helps programs. It helps programs to manage this waste a lot easier with this universal waste rule. Documentation and reporting. This is really an essential element of the collection program. It's good for event sponsors because they want data that shows the program is achieving its purpose, and that's the proper management of household hazardous waste. And documentation, there again, I've touched on this previously. These documents that are developed are kept on file for several years through, and especially at least through the end of life of that waste stream, whether, if it's going to be incinerated, whether it's going to be processed and fuel blended, so that it can show that, okay, well, that waste was managed from the point it was generated, it was managed correctly to its end, to where it was this final end disposal. And in Texas, all collection programs have to, both one day and permanent facilities are required to file annual reports with the TCEQ. These are due every April 1st. And your hazardous waste management vendor, your hazardous waste management disposal company can help with this. And typically for the one-day programs, we typically file this for them. Or at least we complete the form and send it to them so they can file it. But in it is basically a summary of what that collection program collected over the previous 12 months or in the previous year. And this is important data for the TCEQ. This is tracking, okay, how much is being generated and how much waste is, what types of waste are being generated. And this is a requirement to file this with the TCEQ by April 1 in order to be in compliance with the state's regulations. And that's a really quick run through on my presentation. And so I'll kind of open it up to questions and answers. And Lynn, and of course here's my contact information. Should anybody want to reach me outside of this presentation.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jack. The rules aren't always the most exciting thing to learn about, but they're definitely important if we want to stay in compliance. So you did a great job of walking us through some of those, and you've got all those links in your presentation. So I know people can go back and get more in depth with those later on. Do we have any questions for Jack at this time? We have not had any come up yet, but if anybody has any real quick, type those in. I had one, but you answered it on like the second to last slide. So my question got answered, but we will see if there's any. I don't see any hands raised. So, but he did provide his information. Oh, and we are seeing your email, just to let you know.
You see me now?
We do not see your email now. So.
I'm gonna stop sharing it.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. But yeah, so if you have additional questions, I'm sure you can get in touch with him later. So we are going to move on to our final presenter of the morning. We have Diane Covey with the Public Information Officer for the City of Fort Worth's Code Compliance Department, which their Environmental Collection Center falls under. Today, she's going to be sharing with us the various outreach and education efforts the city conducts regarding HHW and their Environmental Collection Center. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Diane.
Hi, Erin. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
How are you today? Good?
Yes, very good. So if you want to share your slides.
Oh, I have to do that?
We can do it if you are not prepared for that.
Hold on one second. Let me try.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find where I need to go. Oh, files?
Well, on Zoom, you go to share screen and then it's...
I'm doing the share screen, but now I'm trying to find my... I'm trying to find my PowerPoint.
Okay. Andrea, looks like Andrea's got it for you. So
Yeah, I've got it up for you. So you could just go ahead and we'll advance them for you.
Oh,
Thank
you
you,
advance them
Andrea.
for me too?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Tell her
great.
when to go.
Hi, everybody. You know, what's funny? I only see like 2 faces on here. Okay, now Erin went away. It's only me.
We did that
I
on
guess-
purpose.
You what?
We didn't want to distract everybody, so we.
Oh, okay. I love looking at everybody's backgrounds and seeing whose cat and dog is walking in front of them. And I'm just praying that one of my cats decides not to do that, you know? That seems to be one of her favorite things here since I'm at home all the time now.
Yeah.
As Erin said, I am a public information officer with the City of Fort Worth, and our Environmental Collection Center falls under Code Compliance Department, and that's the department that I'm the PIO for. Before we get started, I just wanted to say, I know everybody had like a really rough week last week, and I just wanted to say, if you know anybody who's working in the solid waste industry and are drivers on those trucks in those neighborhoods trying desperately to get everybody's garbage, and think about all those people who working on the electrical lines and the water. I know in my city, watching my colleagues not only do their job, but also going out to these water stations voluntarily. It just, it seems like a really great, wonderful thing. So I just thought, let's just take a moment and say thank you to those people. Either your neighbors or your friends or your coworkers, because I think they're all working really hard and kind of deserve a kudo from us, you know? So this is the outside of our Environmental Collection Center. It is not a beautiful building. I wish they would let me in there and do some beautiful graffiti on the outside of that building, but we'll see how long that takes. Next slide. This is just a little bit of background for those of you who don't know about our Environmental Collection Center. It is about 24 years old, which I think is pretty astounding, especially knowing how many other cities don't even have these facilities just yet. It's a 10,000 square foot facility, and we've got some pictures later on in my presentation that show the facility from the inside. After a busy day like on a Saturday, and it's just amazing that you see everything that was collected. There's 11 employees that work for the Environmental Collection Center, and we service about 850,000 residents of Fort Worth. They are only residential collections, no commercial. We do a lot of education and outreach into the community. I'll tell you a little bit about the CRUD cruisers later, but we do have 2 mobile trailers. We have some agreements with other cities, so we do take our mobile trailers to some other communities from time to time as well. Our household hazardous waste collection, which changed in the last couple of years, is it's not just collected at the Environmental Collection Center anymore. Our city has 4 drop-off stations, and they're located in 4 different sections of the community, so it's fairly easy for people to get to them. But about 2 years ago, our drop-off stations also started taking the household hazardous waste. And because our facility, the Environmental Collection Center, is only open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, this really helped residents being able to go and get rid of some of this stuff, you know, if they, you know, are off during the week or that kind of thing. So now they have 6 days a week. I also wanted to tell you that average monthly collections is about 200,000 pounds. That's on average. And over a 5-year period of time, our average per year is about 2.5 million pounds. I think that's a lot, but I don't have anything to compare it to. So maybe some of the others of you guys can share that with us. It'd be kind of nice to know. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about education, and we do a lot of outreach and education into our community. Next slide. We work a lot with the youth in our community. We, in the city, we have a division called the Community Engagement Team. And I think there's about 7 employees in their team, and they service all the departments within the city. They are the boots to the ground people. They are the ones that attend the neighborhood association meetings. They do after school programs. They do in-school programs. They do it on everything from recycling, water issues, animals, our animal care, our animal shelter. They talk about being a responsible pet owner to the kids. And we use the community engagement team a lot in the whole department of code compliance, but specifically we have developed a number of years ago, Captain Crud in the Cruddies. I don't know if you can see this slide any larger or not, but you can see the kids right here with a cutout of Captain Crud. And then he's got on the trailer there, he's got all his little buddies that they represent paint, and I can't see the rest of them. I can't remember all of them. Goop, all kinds of really fun things. And we did that for mostly for the children, but I tell you, the adults love this as well because it's clever, and it's something that, because it is fun and colorful, it reminds people that this is something that's accessible to them. So that's one of the things I like to say. If you're doing any promotions and things like that, do something that's fun. You don't have to be serious all the time. And we're also in the process of changing Captain Crud. He's had a little old school look. So we're in the process of updating him and all of his buddies and bring them out with kind of the new look that the kids are kind of using these days. Like I said, this community engagement team, my department, my folks, we develop the curriculum based on working with the team of the Environmental Collection Center. And then we work in conjunction with the community engagement team. They work with the Texas School Agency, I forget, TAA or something, TEA. And I guess there's a correlation that they can make with the Texas. Is it still TEACS or is it STARS? Does anybody know? Anyway, they do that correlation. So this way our program is approved to go into the schools, which makes it much easier for the principals to say yes, that we've done that behind the scenes work. Again, we go to elementary schools. This community engagement team goes to neighborhood meetings. We go to events at the library, summer camps, after school programs. And then if other departments within the city, like say the fire department or the police department, are doing some kind of a special event, we always make sure that we take our trailer out to that event. Sometimes we can't collect out there, but at least we're getting the exposure so the people know about it. Okay, let's go to the next screen. These are just a few pictures that I wanted to show you. Again, a little bit more of the Captain Crud and the Cruddies. And how we kind of use them. The upper left with the tabletop, that's a really easy thing that we can put up for most of these community events, or if our city council has a town hall meeting, we make sure we're there. The upper right picture, they're just getting ready in this photograph for a big day at the Environmental Collection Center, and it's been a special event that they promoted. So they got a lot of containers out there ready to go. And then here's just another picture of our trailer. But you can see with all the colors and the characters, you can see how it really does draw a lot of attention. And I think that's been part of the key of our success. We've had something that we created something that people can remember. Okay, next slide. Now I want to talk a little bit about the outreach that we do and our various partnerships. You can go to the next slide. I've talked a little bit about the different events and activities and educational opportunities that we have in our community that we avail ourselves to. I said that a lot of our community engagement team does a lot of these presentations, but we also have our staff involved as well. Even more important than that, we partner with other city departments. Our library happens to have just incredible reach on their social media. And so they just don't promote books and activities of the library. They really do promote other opportunities and services that the city offers. So we'll partner with the library, and they'll share our posts, or we'll give them a series of posts and graphic arts that they can use on their library at any time they wish. That way they already have kind of like a stockpile of stuff, and when they want to get some messaging out. But I also do that for our animal shelter and recycling. I have a number of kind of generic but fun posts and graphics, and I send those to our other departments who have strong social media presence. That way they have them right there whenever they have, like I said, have a downtime, want to do a filler. They've got ours already prepared, ready to go. And it makes it a lot easier for them to share. And it's a bonus for us that we get that coverage. But again, doing that behind the scenes prep work, giving our partners what they need to make it easier for promotion, that's always a really good thing. We used to do the mobile collection events within the city, but budget cuts has kind of taken that away. But the good thing is that the drop-off stations were then taking the household hazardous waste. So that was a really good opportunity for me to get that word out to the community. And I'll show you a couple brochures and stuff later on here. Was another really good opportunity to not only promote the Environmental Collection Center, but obviously promoting our drop-off stations as well. Okay, next. Oh, I'm sorry. The picture on the far right, I just love that picture. That was some of the collections that were done after a Saturday. And that's just, you can see that's just one garage door. And would they have like 4 or 5? I think that was a successful day for them. Okay, next slide. Now we're going to talk about promotion and the tools that I have available to me, because I don't have a lot of money for paid advertising. I don't know about the rest of you, but don't get a big budget for that. I do have a budget for printing, so that helps too. Okay, next slide. We use clear, consistent messages. So many times I find out that working with people within my department who are not writers or not the promotion people, I don't know if you've come across any of these, but they want to put their whole story in a flyer that's this big, a postcard. So it's our job to really drill down on that messaging and make it clear and make it consistent. Again, residents have, like we do, we have a ton of things going on in our lives. I have found a lot of success using this single messaging. Even on some of our print flyers, which we're not doing as many of those anymore because of the COVID-19 virus. We've really strengthened our social media presence. These are some of the resources that I have available to me within the city. I'll show you a sample of our print collaterals. There is one brochure that we've used. It's been around for a while and it gets updated. We haven't reprinted it in a year, again, because of the COVID-19. We also have a water bill insert. I don't know if your communities do, but our water department, who sends out their monthly bills, we're allowed to create an insert. We design it, you know, it's in English one side, Spanish on the other. And that reaches about 225,000 residents. It's one of the single best pieces we have in the city of Fort Worth. And the only thing that we get charged for is just our printing of the 225,000 inserts, but the paper's really light. So it's actually not that expensive in the whole scheme of things, because you're considering you're reaching 225,000 people. The city's website. We just did a big changeover and new branding of our website, but this new website, I like it even better because I think that the pages are clear and crisp. And I'm sorry, I didn't give you guys the website address to the household hazardous waste, but I will in just a minute. We, again, like I said, we use social media, and we don't have a lot of influencers in our community that we've been able to identify yet that are super passionate about disposing of household hazardous waste. We have people who are very passionate about telling people not to put their antifreeze down the drain. And believe it or not, that became some messaging during last week's storm. People were on their next door accounts. They were telling folks to put antifreeze down their kitchen drains and in their sinks, and that'll make the pipes not freeze up. That's not true at all. So that was worthy of some media attention for sure. We have, of course, Facebook, and we have Twitter. We do not use Instagram at the moment, only because we don't have the staff to manage it. And if you don't have the staff to manage it, I suggest you don't do it, because then you don't have the bandwidth to put out messages on a regular basis. We had Facebook for many years, and just recently we kind of got into the Twitter business because we had the bandwidth of staff to help out and do that. One of the things our city does have that they put out daily is city news. Our city does have a communications department. All the departments, we work in conjunction with them, and they help push out our messages. City News is a daily electronic newsletter, so to speak, from the entire city of Fort Worth. And depending on what the issues are, what departments are needing to promote, it goes out in City News. I use it on a consistent basis, not just for the Environmental Collection Center, but drop-off stations, because again, all of these different items here, the print collaterals, the website, the social media, the city news, they all overlap each other. And you're trying to reach the greatest amount of audience. And if you just concentrate on putting stuff on your city website, there's only a fraction of people that are going to use the city or the county's website for information. So we try and be as diverse as we can. Our city, through that community engagement team that I mentioned to you earlier, they have access to the next door accounts of the vast majority of neighborhoods in our city. I think it's something like 94,000 people we reach through our next door messages. So obviously that's one that we use for the Environmental Collection Center. Again, single messaging. We found out that just tends to work better, again, like I said earlier, because people's busy lives and they can focus on this little bit of information versus listing all of your services. But that also gives us an opportunity by doing single messaging. It allows us more opportunity to come back and do these messages, and they're not repeat ones. Our community engagement team has recently put together an online publication called the Community Engagement Bulletin. This bulletin is very unique. It only goes to the board members of neighborhood associations. Board members in those neighborhood associations really wanted a vehicle to get a lot of information from the city, and then they transfer it into their newsletter, their emails, whatever their source of communication is with their neighborhoods. Again, they've been doing that for about 2 years, and I find that to be a really good tool. Now, if you don't have in your community this community engagement team that does this, again, if you have the bandwidth, working with neighborhood associations is just an extremely wonderful way to reach thousands upon thousands of people. Again, what I do is I make up little newsletter articles, make up social media posts, put graphics together. And if I didn't have this community engagement team or the use of this bulletin, I would be starting with a few neighborhood associations that are very active and working with their board member, whoever they choose, and give them this information. And again, that way they can use it in their own neighborhood newsletters. But don't forget about these neighborhood associations, especially start with the more active ones if you don't have a big partnership with all of them, because they are such a great resource. They're wanting information to put out to their neighbors. And then finally, I want to talk about media engagement. Our media in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, of course, it's a very competitive market, but they're always very supportive of unique messages. And last week we took advantage of that horrible suggestion about putting antifreeze down your sinks, but we really took advantage of that, and the PIO and the water department and myself partnered on that. And we got some really good primetime media coverage out of that. Media engagement. Yes, I still use media releases, but I don't send to the broad spectrum of media very often. I have built some good relationships with the various television stations and radio stations. And because this is a huge, huge market up here, I'm finding that developing, maybe a dozen or two of those relationships really helps us with our coverage. Maybe that reporter wouldn't cover it, but I always ask them to share with their assignment editor. And I'm glad to answer any questions about any of these, because again, I don't know your communities. I don't know what resources you have. So I thought I'd kind of list and give you some of the things that we do. Okay, next slide. This is there any way that we can make this larger, this screen, or I don't know if everybody can see it or not. Maybe I just put too much on a slide.
Okay, all the users can change the size of their own view, so people can probably see this.
Okay, great. The city does have a YouTube channel, and for some reason, you guys, this was linked yesterday, and it's not linked today, but we do have a YouTube channel. If you have the opportunity, do you have a city cable department that can help you make little videos, or do you have colleagues or that you guys can do? Again, these aren't really polished pieces. These are informative, and sometimes we try and make them really fun pieces. So you pick someone that has a good voice, you do your editing, put it together and smack it on your official YouTube channel, use it on your social media. I wish we had more time to do this. And with some of these video editing programs out there, they're so easy, you can do them right on your phone now. So those of out there, you people who are younger than me, I know you grew up with this stuff and I didn't, so I'm on a real learning curve, but nonetheless, I'm learning. Our website is really nice and comprehensive because we really tell people what they can bring, what they can't bring. They have all the hours of information. They have other resources on that webpage. Our city's website is fortworthtexas.gov, and that's spelled out, Fort fortworthtexas.gov. And in the search bar, you can type in household hazardous waste or the Environmental Collection Center, and it'll get you to those pages. The brochure at the bottom left, this is a leftover piece that residents still like. I have not reprinted it this last year, but that's a trifold piece there. And when I print them, I print 10,000 and 20,000 of these, and they get distributed. People really like them. And on the bottom right, there's a sample of 2 of our water bills that we've done. The vertical one's talking about the Cred Cruiser back when we used to do mobile events. And the other one is about the drop-off stations when we start introducing the Environmental Collection Center items to the drop-off stations. So that's just a few samples. And of course, our city has branding, so you'll see that swoosh on a lot of things. Next slide. Ta-da! You can actually go to the next slide. It has my contact information.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Diane. I'm sure you've given people some new ideas to integrate into their outreach and education strategies. So thank you so much for that. So let me look at the chat, see if we have any. We don't have any questions so far, but if anybody has any,
Thank you.
quickly type those in or raise your hand. We did run over by a few minutes. Sorry about that. But hopefully our speakers can stick
I
around.
tried to talk fast.
Oh, you did fine. I just crammed a little too much into the agenda, I think, maybe. But yeah, so if anybody has any last minute questions, please get those in right now. All right. And while you are typing in your questions, if y'all want to go to the next slide. Thank you. I will go ahead and remind everybody that we have been recording this webinar, and as long as Zoom hasn't failed us and there's no technical problems with the recording, we will be posting it to our YouTube channel within the next few days. So if there's something you want to go back and hear again, or if you want to direct a colleague to it, you'll be able to do that. Barring catastrophes. We do also have a quick survey for you to fill out. The link is in the chat box and also right there on the screen. So you can go ahead and take that if you aren't furiously typing in your question for any of the speakers. Let me check back to the chat. It got covered. Okay, I do have a question for Diane. It says, since several communities around Fort Worth utilize the ECC, how do you do outreach to them?
We have not done a lot of outreach to those communities because once they have signed up with the City of Fort Worth and the Environmental Collection Center, they pretty much do their own promotions. I've never had a request from our staff at the Environmental Collection Center to help. Now we will print out a schedule of all the mobile events that'll take place in our partner cities. And we will design that, print that, and give that to our Environmental Collection Center team. And they disperse that out to the other communities. So they do have some print materials from us that list the schedule, but I've never had been asked to do anything. Most of the cities, from what I understand, do their own promotions. That's a really good question. Thank you.
Okay. That is all we have at this time. So I guess we are going to conclude this webinar. So I did want to give one final thank you to all of our speakers this morning. It was a lot of great information and I was happy to hear it, and I'm sure our attendees were as well. If anyone does think of any questions afterwards, you can always reach out to me and I can get you in touch with any of our speakers. Like I said, we will be posting the recording and also the individual presentations. So you could also get their contact information there. But thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of your Wednesday, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right, bye.